everyone. Hi. My name is Monica Miklas. I'm a longtime Fringe participant and as a producer. I'm a theater producer outside of Fringe too, and I'm also a Fringe volunteer, which is why I get the pleasure of talking to these lovely folks with you lovely folks. Thanks for coming, and it's my pleasure to introduce Vanessa Espino. Hello.
Hello.
And Michael Shaw-Fisher. Two very talented writers who both had, Michael didn't have a show that he wrote in the Fringe this year. He was in a show, but has had many a show in the Fringe that he's written. And Vanessa had a show this year. Mm-hmm. And that was your first Fringe experience, right?
That was my first Fringe experience.
Yeah.
Yes, it was quite a whirlwind, I have to say.
No kidding.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So our plan for the afternoon is we'll spend 45 minutes or so, 45 minutes to an hour, talking to these guys about their experiences as writers and within the Fringe. Then we'll open it up to questions from you guys. And if we end a little bit early, we can have just some time to meet each other and start to build our Fringe community for the year. So let's jump in.
All right.
All right. First, I would love, Vanessa, if you'd start. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about your history in the theater in general, and then about the show you did at Fringe this year.
All right, so hi guys. I've been doing theater since high school. When you jump in, start doing stuff on stage. Primarily, I work back and forth as a stage manager and a playwright, depending on the project and who I'm working with. I've been playwriting since about college, so I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago I started playwriting, jumping in that side of things. And I don't know, it's been a fun ride. It's always fun to explore new ideas and stories and topics and characters and see what's out there and how you can really affect people by just language is really, really fun. So yeah, Odelia is what I did at Fringe 2016. It was a project I started way back in college as kind of this late night idea, and then we kept developing it, and then we brought it to Fringe last year. It's about an hour-long piece set in this middle ground between life and death, kind of a Day of the Dead folklore-themed piece that really explored the value of life, the meaning of what it means to be happy and complete, and all these big existential ideas. But it was really fun and colorful and all that good stuff. I don't know.
Awesome. And how big a cast?
That was a 6-person cast. Yes, mostly women. So I think there was four women, 2 men, 1 primary character, and then the rest was ensemble pieces.
Cool. Great. And Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself, your theater background, your Fringe background.
Yeah, I did, theater in high school and stuff, and then I went to college and did it some more. And then I had little breaks in my college stints where I started writing theater, so when I returned to college again, I started putting up, shows in the school and things like that. And then I got out of college and I went to USC for screenwriting and TV writing, where I got my MFA. And I remember getting out and having my agent and stuff like that. And I remember talking to them, and I was like, I would like to go back to school for directing or something. They kind of looked at me like I was insane. But that was because I was still in love with theater, and as all of my friends from SC have all gone on to very successful staff writing positions at various shows, which you all would know. My focus shifted because I became more and more obsessed with the theater, and so now those friends come out to see my shows, and they come out to Fringe shows and to shows when in between, during the year when I do shows at various theater companies, my own included. They'll come to see that, they'll support it, and we're always sort of in mutual admiration for each other because it seems that my writing has only, the only opportunity to have the kind of writing that you would do in a situation like Fringe is if you were like a showrunner of a TV show. Mm-hmm. Those guys who do the staff writing, that'll get to do the kind of stuff, the exciting, innovative ideas that get to happen at Fringe on a yearly basis. And that's really has made my writing better, to have that freedom, because I've been forced to discipline over time as to meet the demands of audiences and push my own boundaries of talent and subject. So.
Very cool. And actually, while we're talking about background, I forgot something important to do with all the people here. Could I see a quick show of hands of people who are brand new to the Hollywood Fringe?
Yay!
Great.
I want to take a picture of all you guys. Like, I will at one point. I just want to pull my camera out and take a picture and be like, "These are the newbies."
Yay! And how many people are new to playwriting? Who've never written a play before? Sure, people. Okay, good of a mix. Awesome. So we've got people who have been around the block, people who have not. That's great. Wonderful. Well, let's talk about the content of what you guys write. And maybe Vanessa, let's start with you. You mentioned it's kind of a late night idea that came to you. Why did this feel like a story you needed to tell? And what finally gave you the impetus to pick a day when it was going to happen and make it happen at Fringe?
All right, well, the show in particular was kind of a chance meeting, I guess. It came out of a friend of mine who actually ended up directing it, Sarah Figginton-Wilson. We went to college together, and she had a professor who said, "Hey, I'm doing this late night thing in a local theater, and we have an hour spot. Do you have anything?" And she goes, "No, but I have an actress." So she came to me a few days later, and she's like, "Hey, I have this mutual friend of ours. She's a great actress. I'd love her to use her in something. What can we do?" And we started pitching ideas back and forth, and it was around Halloween. So we were thinking maybe a haunted story, something like that, and then we landed on Day of the Dead. And because it's my family background, I'm from a Mexican family, large and boisterous and everything. And so we have this great idea, Day of the Dead, but our actress was my beautiful blonde, blue-eyed friend, Melissa David, who fits none of that stereotype. So we had to kind of come up with this idea of an outsider coming into something different and how they would navigate their way into that. And so it started out as this kind of brainstorming idea, but then it turned into something deeper as we kept developing it, and I turned to my family and their storytelling and stuff like that, and people in my life who I started to use as the basis for characters, and then it just became more than this late night idea. It became this bigger story that needed to be told. And that's kind of where it started. But as it came to Fringe, this little late night idea was something that we felt like not only was good, that needed to be shared, but something that we could really put some focus into. And the Fringe scheduling timeline kind of pushes that focus into making it the best that it could possibly be, because you only have so much time, and then it's June, and you have to go, and there's no turning back. So that's kind of where it came from originally, and then got to Fringe. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Interesting. Michael, you've written a number of shows for Fringe and a number of things not in Fringe, and some were ensemble and some were solo. Like, right. How does an idea for you fall into all those different how do you figure out, oh, this idea is a solo show and it's going to be at Fringe. This idea is an ensemble and it's going to be somewhere else. How does that all happen?
It's kind of like, I mean, really, it's necessity is the mother of invention, you know, kind of like you say. And it's like, well, if you have a show that you really need to say, and you know that either you're going to say it or somebody else is going to do it, so you got to kind of grind against the clock. You have to do it. Also, necessities being financial, fiscal limitations. I can't afford to pay a bunch of actors, so I'm going to have to do a solo show. I can't afford the band. We'll have to have 2 instruments. Scale down is always better for Fringe. I've done both the big things, and I've done the little things. I think honestly that the more intimate things in intimate theater is always going to be easier to do. For Fringe from now on, I'm not doing any big things. Never again. I've done them. I'm never doing that again.
Tell them a little bit about the scale so they have a sense of this.
All right, so like 5-piece rock bands with head mics and 11 actors. You have no tech time to get it right. You've got people coming on your preview, ready to write reviews about it. And you're like, okay, you've had months, you've been preparing it, you've got a musical director, the actors all know what they're doing. It's not like you don't have the elements there, but the technical elements aren't there. And frankly, it's not cost effective to spend the money you're gonna spend on a space and all of the instruments and all of the actors, and you're not gonna make that much back during Fringe, unless you have some sort of guarantee going in that you're gonna have a relationship with somebody afterwards who may help that project go further. You still may have LA Weekly or people coming to your show who are going to rate you on that Fringe version. And I think Fringe is a great workshop. I don't think it's like the ultimate, you know, I don't think Fringe has necessarily all the technical stuff to be like your end all be all your performance. I mean, our best things have been stuff that started in Fringe. We've got a lot of heat, got a lot of great energy behind it, and then taken it to somewhere else. And there are a lot of producers. I know one of them sitting in the audience tonight who would watch your show, and if they really love it, they will take it to that next level with you. And that's what you want, you know, to have the opportunity to explore the material, to see its strengths, and then see where it can go. So in some cases, you may just want to be like, you know what, that's fine. I did my Fringe thing. That was amazing, and now I'm good. But some other people might want to do different things, so you have that choice.
Yeah, I think that speaks to an important thing about knowing what your goals are when you decide this is a project that I'm going to do at Fringe. Think about what is going to be possible in that situation.
Absolutely.
Quick personal aside, I had the same experience as Michael, and the reason we're friends is because we used to be in the same theater and have our giant shows with our 5-piece rock bands back to back and be constantly making each other late. Mostly us making him late, but
I think it was like that.
I then too went to a much smaller show that was so small it fit inside a cargo van, and we realized that the Fringe, that show almost didn't survive outside of the Fringe. It was much more difficult. So inside the Fringe, we had an audience. It was great. Everybody loved it, and we had a really hard time doing a run on our own. So goals.
Yeah.
What were your goals?
Our goals going into it, because our show was a late night pop-up, so all we had to do was kind of bring our assorted props and just act our hearts out. So our goals coming into it wasn't so much making this huge production. It was more of garnering friendships and really get a sense of the Hollywood community, because we're from originally Orange County. So we didn't really have a foot into what the Hollywood community, the Hollywood Fringe community was at all. So it was just more kind of dipping our toes in to see what was out there. And when we got here, there was just so much theater those 3.5 weeks that you're overwhelmed sensory-wise, visually, size of the cast and small space, like huge cast and small spaces and big cast and tiny spaces. It was just, it's an array of everything. So our goal coming in was just kind of dipping our toes and not really expecting much more than dipping our toes, and that worked for us. But yeah, having a sense of what you want to accomplish, whether it's a reading, whether it's a workshop, whether it's a full stage production or, you know, just a musical review, whatever you have in mind, is really good going into it, because you really have to consider the space that you're going to be in, and the cast that you're going to be using, because that's logistically a whole different conversation.
And it's not to say, too, that big productions don't work. It's just that they're expensive, and they involve a lot of organization and a lot of networking to get people to fill those shows. We did Exorcistic. Well, first we did Doomsday Cabaret, which was, well, I didn't really know that many people. I did like Barking Pig, but I really didn't know many people in the communities. That was 2012. I came back. We did Doomsday, and in Doomsday, I had a cast that was really social, and my cast went out and like met people at the bar and socialized, you know, and that helped. And then when Doomsday did pretty well, it got Best Musical at Fringe that year, and then we had a run outside of Fringe at the Blank Theater, which got me an Ovation Award nomination for Best Lyrics and Music, and that was helpful. And then it was like, okay, then next year when we came back with Exorcistic, which was a rock musical parody of The Exorcist, I mean, that already sold itself, because if you do a movie parody, you're already going to get more people in your space, and just the way it is in Hollywood. But that was, I lost money on Doomsday, got money back on Exorcistic, and also having established the reputation in Doomsday also helped. So it's like, it depends on sort of where you are in terms of what you think you could get away with. Then I did Shakespeare's Last Night Out in 2015, which was a solo musical. And that one was, I think, my favorite one I've done on Fringe in terms of, I performed it, I did it all, I played Shakespeare, and it was just, it was intimate, it was at 3 clubs, but it was every bit as successful as those other shows, and had a great run afterwards. So smaller can sometimes be, you know, better, depending on what you're able to handle. If you've got, you know, a cast and you've got 5 actors and 3 of them are really weak, but 2 of them are great and all their scenes are great.
You got a two-hander.
You got a two-hander that will
Yeah.
And
kill.
it's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, it'll be awesome. Like,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit, because that speaks to something that we talked about just before the program started, is editing. And I think that also goes into, I think there's a lot of, especially for me, speaking as somebody who's intimately involved with theater, but I don't sit down at a desk and start writing. I'm not a writer. How do you just get it done? How do you say, okay, I've got this deadline out here of this festival when my show's going up? How do you get the work done? And then how do you start the editing process?
Ooh, you want to take that one first?
We can split those up too. Maybe let's just talk about, like, how do you get the work done? How do you, I'm really distractible. I don't know. It's like amazing to me that you can actually think of this thing.
For me, it's scheduling your time. Scheduling your time is the biggest thing as a writer, because you have a million distractions around you all the time. You have work, you have family, you have social media, you have binging on Netflix. It goes on and on and on. So for me, I really have to schedule that time. I really have to say at 2:30 on Wednesday afternoon, I'm gonna go sit at Starbucks for 3 hours and work. And for me, Starbucks works. That's the place I can write. I can write at a coffee shop with people around me, and that's my writing space. For you, it might be somewhere quiet or, you know, somewhere outdoors. But really scheduling that time works for me. Some people can get up in the morning and write 10 pages and then go on with the rest of their day. Some people do it at the end of the day. Some people don't do it at all. But for me, having that deadline out there and really scheduling in that time of dedicated time, this is when I'm going to write, really helps. I might not get more than a paragraph done, but I scheduled that time to really focus on what I'm working on. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
I was thinking about it. It helps to have generous friends, in the sense that you have somebody who's willing to read it, or someone who's willing to really talk to you about it, or wait for those new pages. Like whenever I write, you know, even if it's a novel, I'll send 2 pages to one friend, and then build his experience or her experience on, and they will tell me what they're getting. It's like with and workshopping, of course, is important too. Getting it written. Turn off Netflix. Just turn it off. Stop input and you just realize that you have enough input, and just focus on the output. And deadlines help me. Was it David Morosky, you know, who wrote Tilt, which I performed in. He's a dear friend of mine and Fringer, very talented writer, brilliant, dedicated. He loves having the deadlines. Colin Mitchell, another guy who's written for shows at Fringe, also loves having deadlines. I mean, when you make those deadlines for yourself, you set them, then you have to meet them. Whatever comes out is going to be, some people work well under pressure, some people don't, but I kind of do. If you set a reading for yourself, say, like, okay, on the 20th of April, I have to have my reading. So that becomes your deadline. That still gives you plenty of time to workshop it before you get to Fringe. So you can pat yourself on the back and be like, oh yeah, I have a finished version, I'm just tinkering.
Did you do any readings with Odelia? Or with past projects too?
Yeah, I tend to, the way I tend to work is I'll sit there and I'll give myself a deadline. Say I have to get some kind of sketch of 20 pages done by this day. And then once I hit that benchmark, I'll either send it out to writer friends of mine who will give me some honest feedback, or I'll sit with a group of actor friends and listen to it. That's the biggest thing, is you can sit and write forever, but until you hear someone else speak it back to you, you really don't know what's coming off the page. And for me, listening to other people speak it and just sitting there and not even taking notes, but just listening really, really helps figure out what the pace is, what the content is coming out of it, you know, really what your story is. Because you can have this great page about sitting at a bar for, you know, half a page talking to this woman, but it has nothing to do with the pulse and the really thrust of your story. And you won't really know that until you listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, working with Odelia and other collaborative projects, having a group of people just to sit in a room and hear back the pages is so helpful. I can't really, even if it's just your family, even if they have no acting experience, have someone read it back to you so that you can really understand, because when it comes to editing on the page, every little punctuation mark means something. A comma versus a period versus an ellipses versus a pause versus a dash all means something different to the actors. And it means something different to you, but you won't know that until you hear it. And that really, really, really helps. I can't explain that more.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're in a reading or a workshop, or even just sending somebody pages and you're asking for feedback, what kind of things are you looking for from them? Not like looking for, I want you to think it's great, but you know, what kind of specific things are you asking them to look for?
You don't want them to try to rewrite it for you. If they identify a problem, it doesn't matter what their solution is. What matters is that they had a problem to begin with. That's what you should earmark. Come up with your own solution, because no one knows it better than you. Sometimes it helps in the readings to have people who aren't great actors act your work. So you won't be sitting there congratulating yourself the whole time on how brilliant you are because they're just brilliant actors. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's good to have actors who are not fantastic, someone you know, just read it. I mean, you want to, in a sense, get from them what, I mean, you know, like you're going to write it and it's going to make perfect sense to you, but you want to see that it makes sense to other people, that the writing is actually there. It's not all in the subtext. It's not lost. And I think that that's what helps, you know. Getting good actors is fine, but getting actors who you know you'll never get for your show, like they'll do you the favor to sit down because, you know, but I'm going to be at the Geffen, but I'll read it for you now. And you're just like, they'll make it look amazing, and then you get somebody else, and then you're like, gosh, I really should have written that scene better.
Huh.
So yeah, I don't know if that's not a here or there.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of flowery language. I love polysyllabic words that go on forever. But then the sentences don't mean anything. The language doesn't mean anything. And so when I ask for feedback, I have to be very pointed. Did you understand what they were fighting for? Do you know the action? Do you understand the subtext? Ask very pointed questions when you want feedback. Because whoever's going to give you criticism, whether it's your writing partner, your director, or your mother, they're going to give you, you know, compliments here and there. But if that's all you're looking for, great. But if you really want criticism on what you're writing, ask the pointed questions. Did you understand what she wanted there? Did you understand what he needed from her? Because if you don't ask, they're never going to tell you. So make sure you know what you're asking for.
And to aid in that, there's an exercise which I'd never really done before, but we did it for Tilt, and Tilt was Ben wrote a very dense play between these two men who are going through this murderous crisis, or what they were going through. And the point is that it was such dazzling language that he wrote. And the characters are constantly going through these changes from scene to scene, I mean from moment to moment. The way we did it and the way I am always from now on as a writer going to do a show, and I'm never going to ever miss this step in the process, is have a table read and sit down for work out a week in your schedule with your cast where you sit down and you break down what the scene is. Because they will just flip through and look for their parts. And then they'll depend on you to sort of so he's, I got it. So he's sleeping with the brother. Okay, I'll do that differently now. And that's that before you even get on your feet, you should have that groundwork. I mean, it helps so much for the actors, the director, if you have any designers, to all be on that same page.
I would even go one further than that. The show that we did in the van was based on Hamlet, and we did a table read of Hamlet before we even started working on the devising process.
We should have done that with Skullduggery.
It was incredible. I
Like,
mean, but we all learned so much about the play that, something that we'd all read a bunch of times, people had been in. Like, oh my God, we get it now. So I would say if you're elaborating on something that's already been written or you're adapting a work, I would do it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially for ensemble work. I mean, parts of Odelia was adapted from the mythology of Oedipus and what is it, Orpheus and Eurydice? Orpheus and Eurydice. It was kind of adapted from that, where Orpheus goes in the underworld and looks for Eurydice and has to come back. So having that table, that kind of rooted subject matter, and especially for an ensemble piece where half of my cast wasn't on stage at the same time, they would come in and out. Knowing exactly where they were going, and what they're coming back into, helped them keep the stakes raised the whole time. So that way you don't have people just walking in and they're kind of trying to bring back the energy. If you have that basis of where you're coming from, where you're writing from, that you can impart to your directors, to your designers, to your actors, they have something to draw from when they're not on stage, when they're not acting, when they're not actively participating in front of an audience. They can still draw from something.
And during that process, they will ask you questions, and you will realize your play made no sense. Which is the best gift an actor can give you is, I'm sorry, why would she's not at all like a liar. Why is she like cheating on him? And you're like, oh, actually, you're right. Maybe that doesn't make the most sense. And it's swear. I mean, one great note from an actor is worth 100 good notes from a director, because they're right on the inside. And when you get the actors, when you get everyone together, I mean, you can't depend on your writing to be so brilliant or the director to be so brilliant to convey all the stuff that the actor needs to know. That should be give them enough time to have their experience and their process, and you'll have a better show.
How do you know when a work is finished?
Never. I can't make that determination for myself because I tend to edit all the way up until the final dress, if I can, if the director will let me to. In fact, building on your last comment, the night of our final dress for Odelia, before we opened up for Fringe, I had to have one of those conversations with one of my actors. He had this pivotal moment, and it was such a fast switch from being angry at Odelia and going off stage, and the way that I had written it beforehand, there was some kind of like ghostly montage of voices, and then all of a sudden she had some epiphany, and then he came back on and he was helping her heal. Well, as an actor, I cut out that whole ghostly montage, so he had exactly 3 seconds to go from fucking pissed off to come back and healing the Odelia character. So I had to sit down and talk with him for 20 minutes and try to figure out a way for him to ground it. And we were tweaking language up until that final night so that it made sense for him. Mm-hmm. But then I had to wait, then my director had to say, okay, stop, no more, So for me, it's never finished. And if I had my druthers, I'd go back and revise it one more time before we did it again. So for me, it's never finished. And one thing I can say about editing is don't think that you're done. Even though your pages are set, your tech is set, don't be afraid to keep tweaking until you are proud of every single moment on stage, because those actors are doing you the service of performing your language. So you have to keep engaging with them to make sure it's clear to them and clear for the director, to make sure that the story gets told to the audience in a way that eventually, hopefully, moves them, because that's what you want to do at the end of the day. So for me, it's not done until the director says, okay, stop.
Yeah, and I mean, the relationship, I mean, I don't know. If there's an actor specifically has a question that's dramaturgical, you know, you can actually speak to it, and if it's gonna help them at any point in the process, I give them the answer. Or I do my best to help them find that answer. And I always keep that on level with the director too. And then I mean, a play isn't finished. It's not finished until it goes to Broadway or is published, and even then, you know, it could still be modified. So all of this is workshop. Even if it were at the Geffen, it would still be a workshop. Nothing is so precious that it can't be made better, and no writer should be so talented that it can't be humiliated and made better. So.
Well, we started getting into directors, and we've talked a lot about actors, which I think is great. But let's talk more about directors, and let's talk about how you as a writer, so you've got this piece that you've been working on. How do you start assembling together the people that you need in order to get it up on the stage? A team.
A team.
A team. Where do you
Yeah.
find your team?
You want to start? You have more experience with Fringe than I do.
With even like a specific, especially for folks who are new, thinking about the beginning of your career, your earliest shows, even that weren't at Fringe, how did you even start that process?
The idea always comes first. The impetus to write always comes first, and then I'll find some sketch of an idea. I've been lucky to be surrounded by artist friends since college days, so we, at least in my class of artists, we tend to collaborate a lot with each other. So finding someone that you trust artistically is a really big plus. Someone that kind of has the same thrust for your idea, because you don't want to be pounding your head against a wall. You don't want to be contradicting each other because the director has one vision and you have a different vision. If you're working in a team, that's not to say that some actors and playwrights don't direct their own stuff. But for me, I feel I work better with a director because it's a wall you can bounce ideas off of. So someone who kind of thinks in the same thrust as you do artistically helps a lot. People that are there to not only support but help evolve your work also help a lot. So Odelia, the director, we went to school together, and we were collaborating from the idea point all the way to now. So for me, it's always helped to have her as a backboard to say, hey, what do you think about this? And then she'll come back and argue that point, or someone to kind of help you argue and evolve your work. I think is the best tool in your tool chest, because you don't want someone just to say, oh, that's great, because then you won't really get to the quality of work that you want to get to if you're always placated. So someone who you can argue with on a friendly term is always good, for me at least.
Yeah, production meetings. Gotta have production meetings. Gotta talk about all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd say in terms of assembling a team, if you're here and you've got a piece right now and you're trying to assemble a team of like directors and things like that, I mean, obviously you're going to think of people that you know who are good and have done good stuff, and if there are any people who you specifically form relationships with in Fringe, it's good to sort of keep those relationships going. I think the hard part for me was coming in to do musicals. I'd done a play, and I directed that and I wrote it. And I wasn't in it. And then I wanted to do a musical, but then I wanted to be in it. But then I wrote the music and the books and lyrics. But, you know, I didn't know how to lead a band. I didn't know how to speak in musical terms. Like, I write from a very sort of, I don't know, like I have a keyboard and a bass, and that's how I write. And I layer all the vocals and all my tracks up, and I create a really dense demo, which has me playing all of the characters with all of the music. And then I am like, who do I give this to? And I had a director who listened to it, who was like, this is awesome. Find someone. And I was like, great. So I had to go find somebody. So I just called like one person up who I knew was in a band. And he happened to attend a class by Michael Tioli. Michael is a composer. He does a lot of film scores, stuff like that. But he also does, he did Tanya and Nancy the Rock musical, he did Carnival over at Sacred Fools. And then Michael listened to it and he was like, oh yeah, I can work on this, I can work on this. And so we've now worked on like 8 things together.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's still the same thing. In Werewolves, I wrote lyrics and he wrote music to the lyrics. But usually it's just me coming up with this demo. And I go to my team now. Michael and I have worked with a bunch of different directors. We have no one director who we work with. I like that, you know, bringing in different visions and actors who we always come back to, because if they get it, that's huge, you know. That's where I guess forming a company was really useful, and that happened, you know, for Fringe. I formed a company and kept that company going outside of it. I guess you just got to reach out to anybody you can. I mean, like you think about, you know, the Stooges in high school or Radiohead in high school. Like those artists just met.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, you play bass, so come be in the band. And that's how you sort of gain an admiration for somebody, and from there legends are made. I guess you just have to sort of trust your instinct with people and try to pull people in, and if they've got some creds, fantastic. If they jive, if they seem to get it, if they respond to the material.
That's the biggest thing.
Michael
yeah.
did.
Yeah.
I was like, great, you get it.
Yeah. I'm just curious, is anybody out there planning a musical? A few. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, any other musical writing specific things you've learned on your journey that you think that are different than writing straight plays?
Yeah. I mean, with musicals, writing musicals, I like to write them myself first. And then I like to give them to somebody else. Or do a reading. I like to have all of it done. So I have one version of it in my hands. And then I like to give it away. For one thing, you know, if you're just waiting to give it to somebody, that's an incentive to finish it, you know? If you give people piece by piece, well, I already got congratulated for this little piece, I may have finished it this year, you know. But if you wait to sit somebody down, like with my buddy Joe Frio, this thing we did Skullduggery at Sacred Fools recently. It was a main stage over there. And it started with me walking into Joe's house, and Joe was in Doomsday Cabaret, which we did at Fringe, but later. And I walked in there with a 6-pack of Mike's Hard Lemonade. And 2 6-packs of Mike, 1 raspberry, 1 regular. Awful, awful. Who would drink that crap? And we sit down, I'm like, we're gonna listen to this whole thing, and I'm gonna talk you through the whole thing. And he was like, do it, let's do it. He was a Winston, drank it. And then, and after the end, he had the whole thing, and he was able to speak to me about all the various parts. We also had readings, we had 2 readings for it. Very useful, but I would say in terms of the writing, doing it alone first, making it yours. Don't have so many cooks in the kitchen. Make it your vision. Make it the thing that you've been dying to say. And that purity will hopefully be something that extends to other people, and they'll identify that about it and like it. And also getting collaborators in your team, getting people who are really, really knowledgeable about the things that you don't know. You got to know your own shortcomings and your own limitations, and bring in the people to pick up that slack. If you're doing instrumentation for a show, you have to know how much that's going to cost. You have a vision of you want drums, okay? Well, you need the drum shield in a little space. You need it. You have to be prepared that no one's going to hear any of your actors over the music, which I've dealt with a couple times. I've seen musicals win Best Musical and stuff like that with just a keyboard. That's all you need in a Fringe space, is just a keyboard. Sometimes they have a big harp and a keyboard and piano. I mean, you know, by degrees it can become more complicated and more expensive, but the temptation to build it and make it more expensive is always there. That's a long answer, but resist making it more expensive. I'll just say that right now.
Yes.
Do that over and over and over.
Resist making it more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. This is now kind of bridging a little bit into the stuff that we get into in the spring panels with the town halls and the producing workshops. But do you find that, because you've written things for other venues that weren't the Fringe,
Right.
did you find yourself as a writer editing yourself in ways that you knew were going to make the show successful in this setting where there's a half hour to load in, load out, things are crazy, everybody's running around?
First I always look at character and story. If the character and story work, then tech-wise, you can always make it bigger, make it smaller. But definitely for Fringe, be aware of your tech limitations as far as your writing goes. So some places are as big as this. This is one of the Fringe theaters. Some places are much smaller and have much smaller technical capabilities. So be aware if you need projections in your show to tell part of your story, make sure that it's really part of your story and not just a special effect. Like whatever effect you're going to use in your story, for me at least, make sure it's anchored within the character or the action, because otherwise it just can be a hindrance. You only have about 10 minutes to load in, load out. We were lucky enough to have a space that let us hang a lighting fixture to give us a cool lighting effect over, because we had an ofrenda, an altar, like a Day of the Dead altar on our stage, and we needed that special. Not every theater will let you hang a special. Not every theater will let you use projections. Not every theater is going to have great sound. We saw a production last year, it was like a 5-piece band and a 10-person cast, and the stage was half the size. But they made it work in their space. So just be aware when you're writing, you will have some limitations that you'll come up against when you get into the space. But as long as it's rooted in the story, as long as it's rooted in the action, and you can justify it to the director, if you have a director or if you are the director, be aware that some of the big ideas might have to be scaled down once you get there, because you just logistically might not be able to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever directed your own work?
Not since college, and I prefer not to.
Yeah.
I stage manage off and on a lot, so I work with directors quite often. But I don't like to direct my own work because I like having that second perspective. Plus, once you get to production, you are that extra hand. You are that extra pair of hands. For Odelia, we had written a Day of the Dead piece, which means 5 out of the 6-person cast had to have sugar skeleton makeup on. We did not have a makeup artist.
Oh, wow.
It was me and the director, and ridiculous call times for our actors in a different space, because we'd only have 10 minutes to load in. So you don't have hour call times in your space. We had to drive, 2.5 miles to Theater of Note on Cahuenga for our load-in time. So we were in this small space, studio space that had no air conditioning, caking our artists in black and white skull makeup, packing all of our costumes and props, running down to the Theater of Note, loading in, doing our show, loading out, and then finding a drink somewhere. That was our day. So eventually you will become that extra set of hands if you're not directing. If you are directing, get yourself an extra set of hands. You'll need it. Because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know logistically what your load-in is going to look like till you load in. And you only get so much time to tech, you only get so much time to get in the space and get out of the space before the next group comes in.
And that can be somebody's spouse, that can be somebody's little brother, whoever. Have the extra set of hands.
Have the extra set of hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see, what time we got here? It's about time to segue. To wrap up, if there was one thing that we haven't said yet, one thing you want everybody to take away from today as they go out and start writing, or continue writing, continue developing, to get ready for Fringe, what would it be? It's a tough question. It does take a minute.
It takes a minute, yeah. Story. Story. If you have a story to tell, if you have something to say it. The Fringe is the one place where you don't have to worry about censorship. You don't have to worry about offending anybody. You don't have to worry about entertaining anybody or not entertaining anybody. People are there to experience theater. So whether they like it or not, they'll come. And they may like it, they may not like it, but don't be afraid to say it, whatever it is. Don't censor yourself. Try anything. within your means. Try anything, say anything, do anything, whether it's a movement piece or a spoken word or a 10-person play or an 8-person musical or a 1-person solo piece. Do it. This is your chance. This is your chance just to get up on stage and do it. Whatever you had dreamed of doing on stage, do it. This is your venue. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a sandbox.
Yeah, for me it's like a love letter every time. You make Shakespeare's Last Night Out was a love letter to Shakespeare. I could have done a 3-hour play. Could have done a mini series on what I learned about Shakespeare and tried to fit into an hour and 15 minutes. And I did it just because I loved it. My love for it was what was infectious in the show. And we have one more on Tuesday, by the way, over at 3 Clubs. It's one of those things. The more you are excited and in love with it and eager to see this thing, the more everybody else will be too. Everyone else will be too. Because there's just, and of course, yeah, and in that sense, yes, be bold, be fearless in telling it. Is nudity a part of your show? Is it something that an actor is willing to do? If you're planning on acting in it, it's something you're willing to do. Is it something important? Is it a gimmick? Whatever it is, most importantly, do whatever is essential. Do nothing less than that, and don't compromise. You have all the time right now. You could write 3 Fringe shows in the time you have before you need to go into production. You could do, if you have 3 on your mind, and you're choosing between the one that's going to be, just one that's a crowd pleaser, and you think will please the crowd, well then do that experiment. It may not please them, but do that experiment if you want to. If you one that's like the one that you want to put on your gravestone before you die, like, hey, I may not make it out of 2017 with the way things are going right now. I want to have a show that says everything that I really want to say, then didn't do that one. I promise you the one that you have the most conviction about, people will respond to. And the one that you're doing just because well, I tried that really dramatic thing once and it didn't work, and now I'm just going to make people laugh. And everyone will go, yeah, that was a little bit vapid. And they'll see through it because the audience, the Fringe audience, which is comprised of you,
yes,
will be discerning enough to look at the stage and say, that person tried to give me something, or that person just tried to please me, or just tried to please, they think they're writing a sitcom, whatever. Like, not the sitcoms are bad, they can be incredible. I don't know. I'd say go for the thing that you gotta say. That's the only thing in writing that will get the project done, that will be worth all the heartache of putting on a Fringe show, because there will be plenty. But it also is the most glorious thing when it works. It is the best reward to be like, that came from my heart and people answered it. It's the best thing.
Awesome. I'm going to add one too, which I didn't do last time. From my years of watching writers in the Fringe, which is let the constraints and the structure of this type of a festival liberate you. Because you can't have a billion flashing lights, so you don't even need to worry about what a show with a billion flashing lights looks like. Yeah. You can only have so many sound cues, so you don't have to worry about that. So let it be easy.
Yeah, and if the script calls for fireballs in your hands, and that's what you wrote, and you don't go back and think, well, how would I do the fireballs in my hands, and then lose like 2 weeks in your writing about that. Just write the fireballs in the hands and move on. And if you have a director who's like, oh, well, just put an LED right here, and then that's enough.
I'll send you fireballs. Yeah.
I'll send you fireballs. But yeah, it can be really freeing to be like, I only have an hour, and also the time constraint is also huge. Like, gotta make it fit, or you're gonna be kicked out of the theater.
Yep.
That's
people will walk out because they want to get to the next thing.
Yeah.
Not because your work wasn't good, because they want to get to the next thing.
Yeah, and they're gonna tell you this. If you come back to more of these things, they'll tell you always start on time. Really, always start on time.
Yeah.
At Fringe, in regular theater, they never start on time.
No.
Yes. Fringe start.
People freak out. All right, cool. Well, thanks, guys. That was really shows a lot of the depths of your writing skills. Let's open it up for questions. Okay, Seth, your hand first.
So I've been writing my plays, so what would you recommend as far as, but I've done nothing else yet, so what would you recommend as far as a checklist of things that need to get done, so those major things, and then what would be an approximate time which would be good to get them taken care of?
Are you talking about writing or producing? Because those are two different questions.
I'm done writing, so producing.
So producing.
Oh, you're done right, okay.
So for me, as a stage manager, I always work back from opening. So go to June, start scheduling yourself back from there.
Okay.
By this date, you have to have your, what is it called? The registration in. By this date, you have to have your advertising in. Those ones are set. Everything beyond that, beyond the registration, make a timeline for you to have a director. Make a timeline to have designers if you want them. Make a timeline to have your casting done. Make a timeline to have your budgeting done. Budgeting is big. Make a timeline to have your printing and your marketing figured out. Marketing is huge at the Fringe. I cannot tell you how many people came up to me and said, here, come see my show, but their flyer was crap. You know, you want to make your image for your show just as important as the story you want to tell. But that all comes from the producing. That comes from scheduling yourself back.
If you want to hire a producer,
Hire
that's
a
not you.
producer,
Hire
yeah.
a producer, or talk your friend into doing it. Just
Extra
one, two.
hands. Extra hands are big. You need extra hands. As many as build yourself a village. You say it takes a village to raise a child. Same thing in Fringe. It takes a village to run a show. Build your village as soon as possible so that you have your team going in and you're not struggling at the last moment to say, oh my God, who's going to run box office? Because my theater doesn't run box office.
Yeah.
But that's logistics stuff. Writing stuff, now that you have it written, make your timeline for whenever you're going to read it, if it's a public reading or just a personal reading, and stick to it and stick to your revisions until you get to your rehearsals. Because as much as work as you can do as a producer playwright now to get to your rehearsal space, do it.
Yeah.
Make a list of your props, special costumes. If there's a specific piece of furniture or something that you know you're gonna need, it's gonna be hard for you to procure, and get it. If you need flash paper and you can't get it, stage man LA, you use it anyway. But if you got flash paper, you can't get it in LA, so you have to go somewhere else to get it. Like, there are certain things that you should definitely try to mark down in your script, and that it goes to the whole idea of working backwards. I mean, that was spoken like
Yeah.
beautiful.
A true
yeah.
pro.
That's that's yeah. I want to do a show with you.
The biggest thing is if you're writing something and you have to have this one effect or you have to have this musical cue out of 20 musical cues, rate the most important things versus the less important things.
Ooh,
Because there's going to be a point in your production process, your rehearsal process, where you say we just can't do it. Are you willing to give up that one thing or fight for the 5 little things? You know what I mean? So as you're writing, figure out when you have a moment after you've read it, after you've gotten a chance to step away from it, think like a stage manager and go in and rate from importance. These are the things I need. These are the props that I need. These are the costumes that I cannot live without before you go to your director, your designers, your cast. Then you have some kind of point of origin of where you can go from there when you're working backwards from the scheduling timeline.
Yeah.
Well, how soon before the festival do you have access to your space?
That depends on your
It
space.
really depends. Yeah.
Yeah, that
That's
totally
something
depends on
you-
your space.
Yeah, and so I'll do we'll go there, and I'll do a quick plug right now, and apologies to people who were here this morning, you're gonna hear this a couple more times. There's a series of town halls and a series of producing panels in the spring that the Fringe produces. They usually start at the end of February, beginning of March. They come out in the newsletters, the dates come out in the newsletters, and they're filmed, so if you can't be there in person, you can always watch them online. And they happen with enough time to deal with a lot of these producing issues, except for things like hiring a director, maybe some casting. Like, those are the things I would start to look at now. The marketing stuff, you can kind of wait, I think, until
You can wait till like March, April, yeah, but
and do some of those.
technical crew casting,
early.
directors get them now.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for a director, I didn't say this before, but yeah, go see some shows locally.
Yeah.
Because the directors who would do Fringe for you are the ones who are directing over at, Celebration or Sacred Fools or The Blank. I mean, they're people, you can walk up to them, the Skylight Theater Company, and be like, hey, I really enjoyed your show. I am doing a show, you may be interested, I'm talking to a couple different directors, but I wondered if you might be interested in this. and then just, you know, they may jump on board, and then you've got a relationship. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, it's a great piece of advice. Okay, up there?
Yeah, you had, you've been talking a little bit about doing readings and things like that. Do you ever do shows that are readings in the?
You can.
For Fringe? Is that
Yeah,
ever happened?
yeah.
Yeah, that's happening.
Yeah, you can, from what I understand Fringe to be, because the last year was my first year, but from what I understand is it can be anything you want it to be.
Right.
There was people who just came up as an ensemble and did ensemble monologue pieces. There was, you know, short scenes kind of threaded together as one act. I mean, it's whatever you want it to be. So if you're not ready to do a full on your feet production, yeah, do a reading. Why not?
I would charge people for a reading, but
Yeah,
it's a great way to do it. I mean, there's a couple people who've make sure they you know, they do their one reading in the Fringe, and they always get a ton of people. And that's another great thing about the Fringe, just in general. I mean, the turnout in terms of LA theater is pretty fantastic during Fringe. I mean, you're gonna get, you know, for your solo show about, you know, Liza Minnelli, you're gonna have a full house. I mean, I guess you would anyway. But anyway, the point is that it's like people come out in droves. And if you network, I mean, that's if you network, if you go out there and do it. I mean, you really can make a real impression on folks, and that's pretty great too. I
Yeah.
just want to throw that out there.
definitely. There's all sorts of stuff.
Once you've written your play, how do you find the financial?
That's a tough question.
That's a very tough question. We self-produced. Me and my director, because we've known each other for ages, we kind of went half and half. So she kind of took the responsibility of the finding the funds for the space, for the registration, the big stuff, and then I kind of took responsibility of all of the in rehearsal, in production kind of prop costs, makeup costs, anything like that, small things that I took care of. Print media costs, I took some of that as well. So the biggest thing I would suggest is GoFundMe pages, anything like that. If you don't have a financier, trying to get some kind of crowdfunding. If you don't have a bankroll in your back pocket, I think it would be the best way to go. Because, like I said, it could be as expensive as you want it, or it could be as inexpensive as you want it. It really depends on the story you have to tell and what the right venue is for it. I saw a piece last year. It was a one-woman show. She did not speak any dialogue. It was all physical acting until the very last line of the show. Very compelling piece of theater. But I thought she might have been better in a smaller space. Versus another one-woman show where I thought she could have used a bigger space because her personality was just that exuberant. So it just depends on what you want for your story and what's appropriate for what you can afford. Because eventually you're self-producing unless you have a producer lined up.
And if you are crowdfunding, then, you know, doing Indiegogo or Kickstarter, then, you know, you offer little things if you can, right? You do you do internet thank yous where you go up there on Facebook and you say, we want to thank these people who contributed this week. And you do their names, do a little video if you've got a cast for it already, people who are excited about it, get them involved. You do a Kickstarter campaign, you want to make a little video that describes what your project is, what the ideas are, who you have involved in it. And if you're doing it, also make sure you give them prizes on different levels. That helps sometimes. If you're planning on making a t-shirt anyway, throw them a t-shirt. If you're planning on doing making some special edition keychain or whatever that is, give it to them. Like
We did bumper stickers.
yeah, bumper stickers. That's great. See, it's totally
band.
important. Yeah, yes. Well, I guess that's perfect for you guys. So yeah, I mean that's the thing to do with that. I mean, really, honestly, it's going to cost you a trip to Europe. Is what it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you about. It could cost you anywhere. It could cost you anywhere from like $400, you know, for bare minimum to like $4,000, $5,000, $12,000. Who knows how much you're going to spend on it? But the truth is, it's got to be like you got to go in knowing that there's a good chance if you don't budget it properly that you're going to lose money. And if you're okay with that, then fine. But you can budget it properly to make money. It just takes a lot more of the focus of, that she's talking about and planning stuff out, really budgeting what your limits are gonna be in terms of your space. God, I really wanna have 10 shows, I wanna have 10 performances. Like, well, can you fill 10 houses? Like, can you fill 10 houses of 99 seats? Because you're not gonna get that many.
And be aware there's this thing called friendship swaps, where if you want people to come see your show, sometimes you'll swap tickets.
So you can see there.
So there might be a certain amount of seats that you're gonna save
You need
for fringe
comps
swaps,
for people.
for comps and stuff like that. So be aware of that when you're budgeting as well, what your full, if your full capacity is this much, budget for what you can afford to lose, and then it can go on and on.
That's become
Yeah.
more popular too, by the way, in recent years. It's just being like, okay, I want to come see your show. When can I do that? Or you want to, you know, like they're just assuming they're going to come see your show and you're going to go see their show,
Right.
and that's become, you know,
For better or for worse.
For better.
because we're all like in the red in terms of money. Like we're all trying to like, you know,
Yeah.
trying to fill our houses and make money, so we can't afford to go spend lots of money on seeing shows.
Yeah.
Not all of us.
What's
Some-
tricky is when like
if you budget well, you can actually make money.
I've
Yeah.
produced multiple fringe shows that made money.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I produced a fringe show that lost a lot of money, but we knew it was going to because we actually didn't sell tickets. It was free.
I can't wait to find out what that is.
What? No, almost all the Lost Moon shows made money.
Yeah, I
I think
figured.
one kind of broke even. The others made a sum of money,
Yeah.
and the Hamlet-mobile didn't because we didn't sell tickets.
Oh,
It was
that's-
free. So.
Like, how much did that lose? Like, if that's a lot of money, what's a lot of money for Fringe?
We did an Indiegogo fundraiser for it. So out of pocket, like I was probably out of pocket between $500 and $800, as was my partner.
So average show run, like, when we talking like, I know you're saying it's like a ballpark, but is it like,
Well, I don't know, I can't speak to what the actual average fringe budget is, but I would say it's probably about $2,500. That seems like,
For an ensemble cast, for a bigger
Yeah.
space like this, yes.
yeah.
I would say we spent probably, and I may be completely wrong because I don't know her actual budget on her side, but probably close to 1,300.
Yeah.
And we came in at just about even, maybe a little less than even. But again, speaking before, what are your expectations going into it? We just wanted to dip our toes in. We weren't even really expecting an audience to show up because we were this, you know, couple of girls from Orange County talking about Day of the Dead. You know, what do we know about that? But so it really pays to engage the community around you, engage these writers around you, engage the community at the workshops in the spring, do every single fringe drop-in at every single bar, talk to as many people as you can, because those people are gonna come see your show. So if you want to break even, if you wanna make money on your show, start talking about it as soon as possible. Start knowing what your show's about as soon as possible, so that you can get people in. But that's more, again, on the producing side.
Yeah, and I'd say if that's one of your goals, go on the Fringe YouTube page and pull up some of the past producing panels now, so you've got kind of a leg up.
And,
Yeah.
and if it's a musical, it will cost you $5,000 to $6,000.
Yeah, that's about right.
If it's a musical, the full band, you know,
You have to pay musicians.
Yeah.
You have to. Yeah.
you have to pay musicians
about
about
solo
60 an hour.
Solo shows?
Solo shows, vastly different, obviously. I mean, if you're doing a solo play, you only have to pay your tech, you know, person doing, you know, your lighting or whatever. If you have your
How does that work, like for lighting? Would you get a person in the theater, cause he would know the board, he would know the theater and the lights and everything?
Depends on the
It
venue.
depends on the venue. Most venues
have their
come with
own
a
people.
stage manager,
Yeah.
but it does pay to have your own stage manager. So that has been with you while you've been rehearsing and stuff.
Lighting.
Lighting, they'll help, I mean, most venues have their own stage manager, so they know the board, but they're very low tech.
Some,
They're
some
very low
even
tech.
some even insist on having their own stage manager present, whom you have to pay, because they don't want anyone messing with anyone else's stuff.
With the lighting.
Well, but-
Yeah.
And you mentioned the hour before, the shows have to be an hour?
No. Oh, the hour is like
That's probably the standard time. So the way the Fringe works, if you're brand new, most theaters are trying to book back to back to back to back to back, so they can fit as many shows into their space as possible. And so that means there's a very quick turnaround between shows, and typically it's a fixed time slot. Very often that's an hour. Sometimes you can pay a little bit more and get an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Well, if it's an hour show, you can't, you know, you gotta prepare yourself to go on stage, and then people gotta get out of the theater.
Yeah, so that's
So it
built
has to
into
be
the
an hour and a
turnaround
half.
time.
That's built into the turnaround time.
Yeah.
They've worked all that out, so
Yeah.
it's built
Yeah.
in, yeah.
Yeah. But that's something to, as you go around looking for venues, to make sure you're asking all the venues you talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
This is a question about subject matter. If you have like a historical event, something loosely based on a person's life or an event, to what degree at this stage are we able to, be creative and at what point do you have to get like permission?
If it's unauthorized, for example, like the unauthorized story of
Yes.
Deborah Winger, I don't really know. I mean, you sort of have to feel that out. Fringe scale is small enough that you should be okay. I mean, it's not like you're, getting reviewed by the New York Times.
But if you want it to have legs, you should do your research,
Yeah.
maybe contact an entertainment attorney, ask an expert.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to ask questions, especially if you're using published work, make sure you pay for those rights. So if you want to do a Fringe production of Bye Bye Birdie, make sure you pay Samuel French for those rights, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're doing a
definitely.
Fringe parody version of Bye Bye Birdie, then you got a little wiggle room, but it doesn't hurt to ask the questions. Definitely ask the people.
Yeah, even in parody, I got contacted by William Peter Blatty, who wrote The Exorcist, and he was doing The Exorcist over at the Geffen, and he was doing like a proper play, right, with Brooke Shields and Richard Chamberlain, and like they were all getting ready to do that show, and it was like happening within a month of Fringe.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, they contacted me and were like, or Blatty specifically contacted me and was like, any other time you could do it. Any other place you could do this parody. You can't do it right now. I'm like, it's a Fringe parody.
What happened? Did you?
I held off for a year,
Wow.
and I wrote Doomsday Cabaret because I had 2 weeks to write a musical. And I wrote
Wow.
Doomsday Cabaret in 2 weeks. And then did Exorcistic the next year with his blessings to do it for Fringe only, which was
Oh,
interesting.
Interesting.
And then he actually talked to me about producing or adapting a play of his into a musical. Yeah, which never really came about. I had other things I was doing, but it was he's really, I got to form a relationship with him. He's a really cool guy. So I mean, yeah, you talk to these people. It's good to reach out. They're just human beings,
Yeah. This came up in the last panel though too, so I'm gonna do a little research and see if there's somebody kind of in the Fringe world, or an attorney or somebody who might be able to be a resource for people,
Yeah.
so stay tuned. Just one-
Yeah.
Yeah, did you have a question?
I think it was a comment. Just like the tenor of conversation I'm hearing is like when the art that one or that we create, it comes first, right? And it's worth it to us to be as honest and invested in creating that as possible. And then once it's made, just let it live. Because like the strength of how it's going to succeed for us, whatever our definition of success is like considering all of the other like aspects that are like mostly logistical, like how am I spending my energy, which is finite, about how I'm practicing this, developing it, rehearsing it, whose eyes am I putting on it, and then like scheduling forward, or like you said, scheduling backwards, like. So your comment about like let all of the limitations of the Fringe be the freedom. It's like, yeah, it's like just keep thinking of all of the little containers that are all connected to coming to the real performance, and just trust that it doesn't need to be good. Actually, just all you need to do is like be as involved and engaged with it in every way, to try to develop what you think your best vision of it is.
Yeah, as you possibly can. Some of the best stuff is the most minimalistic stuff. Some of the very best stuff out there is like bare bones, two-handers on a stage, minimal lighting, great writing.
We've given, Orgasmico Theater Company is my company that we do mostly Fringe stuff, but the Orgasmico Theater Company, we do 3 awards every year. We do a most orgasmic production, most orgasmic performance, and most orgasmic writing. And it's not based on sex, it's just, it's a complicated thing. You'll see the description. Most shows qualify for it, actually. But what's funny is that we've given the O-Face Award to, I think, like 2 or 3. The best production has been like 2 different solo shows. I mean, I've had my brain rocked by solo shows. I mean, just what you're able to achieve in sort of an intimate space it's just limitless. I mean, once you narrow the audience's focus to one person's experience, suddenly you have, I mean, you can hear a pin drop in every little moment, you know? So I would say, yeah, in terms of minimal, I'm talking about best production we gave it. You know, when I'm talking about things that people are throwing colors and all sorts of stuff at you, but the tightest production. Heck, we gave it to Ben Morosky for The Wake, and it was just him and a chair. And it was the way, and the chair was this, sometimes it was the body of a dead girl who he was falling in love with, and sometimes it was just fantastic how he controlled the environment, and him and Nick just manipulated those aspects. Production isn't production. Production's is here. It's one light bulb in the corner, and it's a person's relationship with that light bulb. It's pretty incredible what you can do in Fringe.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of like what they say doing improv. If you're trying to be funny when you're doing improv, you're probably going to take down the whole scene and everybody with you. But if you're trying to be honest and be a character in the scene, then funny stuff is going to happen. Yeah.
My piece is very Korean, and a lot of my language is in Korean language. And so if you look at my script, it's half is Korean, half is English. So in between translating into English. But a lot of terms are specifically in Korean in historical. So there's no English term to translate it. Some in between either make up a word or substitute with some other Western word that doesn't really suitable for Korean history.
Don't be afraid to use Korean.
Oh.
My play was Spanglish. Half of it was in Spanish, half of it was English.
Okay.
And as long as the action behind the other language is understandable for the actor and for the audience, don't worry about it. Use what you think is best. Use Korean.
Okay.
I'll be quite honest, half of my Spanglish, I use Google Translate for the Spanish. And then I gave it to my actors who are colloquial speakers, and they helped me refine it to be more conversational. So don't be afraid to use whatever tools you have to tell your story.
Cool question.
So if you're writing and directing a show at the same time, how does that process work for you, wearing both of those hats? Like, how do you manage being the writer and the director throughout the show?
Well, one of the things is, I guess, you know, in some ways it's an advantage because, you know, it's an intimate space. It's an intimate medium. Elephants are upstairs. It's like there's a, I mean, they can come to you for all the questions, for all the answers. And I mean, it's great. If you're acting in it, that's bad. Writing, acting, directing from the stage with other actors, I've seen horrible shows where they've attempted that. Horrible shows. Hopefully they're watching. What's that?
Pick 2 of the 3. I've seen people try to do all 3, and it's not good.
Yeah.
You can do 2 pretty well.
Pick 2 of the 3. Yeah, and if you're producing it, and there's a director, and you wrote it, and you want to be in it, well, then you have some influence as the producer. You could be like, well, this isn't the tone I'm supposed to go for as the writer, and I just want to make sure as the producer I'm assuring the tone is happening. And then they're like, oh, I'm going to just look, you see what you did there with the hats? That was pretty good. But, I mean, if you're the writer and you're directing, I mean, that's fine, you know. It just means, it just means that I think as you should just keep your ears open to the actor's feedback more. Because as the writer, you're going to be doing that anyway, going in, and their thoughts on the character. You'll become their sole person they go to for all, you know, affirmation in their process. So just be willing to give that to them. Be careful how much you give to them, because give them too much affirmation and you laugh too much at their jokes. Or if they make a joke on the stage that's consistently funny and you're laughing because you're like, oh, that's so much funnier than even I wrote it. That's even better. Do that. They won't do it. So, you know, yeah, be careful with that stuff leading up until opening, and that would be my suggestion. I was very generous, and give them an inch, sometimes they'll take a mile. So you gotta keep them on a tight leash, those actors.
Oh, man. Video?
Within the festival, do productions often perform more than one time throughout the festival?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, full weekends, like maybe a normal run.
I think Odelia had 5 performances and then we were extended for one. But we scheduled it in a way that we had like one on one Saturday, because you have 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. If you're doing previews, you have 4. Three-ish weeks if you're just doing performances to schedule out. So, I mean, it's kind of a strategy game. If you want to put all your performances at the beginning of the month, then you have 5 in 1 week. Or you can schedule it out, have one on a Tuesday, have one on a Thursday, have one on a Sunday afternoon, you know, whatever your venue will allow you to. But you want to be able to get as many people to see your work as possible. So be aware of the heavy times and the light times. Because there were some times when we were sitting here and we had a ticket that was comped for an 8 o'clock and we just got out of a show at 4, so we had 2 hours to find something to do. And sometimes there was a lot of stuff you could see and sometimes there was like 2.
Yeah.
So be aware of the traffic times and what's best for your story. If your story is a cabaret or if it's a burlesque, yeah, you want a lot of the late night spots.
Right.
If it's kind of family friendly, then you want to schedule early. It just kind of depends on what your audience is and what your story is and what you want to get across.
Yeah, and if you're, I mean, and depending on how many shows to get, that really depends on, I mean, if you're doing a show that's branded in pop culture, you know, like Planet of the Apes, something, you're going to have a certain amount of people who respond. If it's a Doctor Who parody, you're going to have a lot of people in the house. But then, you know, so I wouldn't have 4 performances of that. I mean, they'll all be sold out, but you'll be sitting there talking to your event manager, you know, venue owner, a manager person will be like, okay, how can I get more shows? And they'll be like, well, I could give you this one that's Monday night at midnight. And you'd be like, oh, that one sucks. And that time would generally suck for most people. Though a midnight show of Doctor Who on a Friday night would do really well.
Yeah.
You know, Saturday night, you maybe get some Hoosiers or whatever they're called in the house. I mean, the idea is that, I mean, you have to be realistic with yourself. If you're doing a solo show about, you know, a person who's suffering from a terminal illness, it's going to be hard to fill up, like, you know, 8 performances of that in a 50-seat theater. It's just going to be tough, even if it's incredible. Sometimes it's good to start modest, and then to grow, and then add on performances as you go. And like she added on an extra performance. That's totally good. It also helps too going in if you have a little bit fewer, because then you really fill up those first 4 or you know performances. People will be like, oh yeah, when's it playing again? And the thing is, Fringe goes by so fast. At the beginning, everyone's handing you postcards. You see they've got like 5 shows. You're like, oh god, that's great. And then you get to the 3rd week, and they're like, oh, I want to see that. Oh, it's totally done.
It's a Thursday at 4.
It's already finished. Like I can't see it, and it's gone.
And it's gone.
Please add. Are you adding another show? Add a midnight show. Add another show somewhere. Please do it. Like I'll come. And but knowing your content is going to be big on how you choose how many shows you have. And if you have a solo show and like a 99 seat, like probably isn't a good idea.
The size of your casting crew really comes into that too. If you've got, you know, a band and a cast of 10, you can probably fill a pretty big house just based on how many people those people know.
Right.
If it's a 2-hander, you might want to look at a smaller house. Buzz also builds through the festival, so I think shows are I think people have a better experience.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, if you have staggered times and staggered shows across the festival. That's kind of
Yeah.
that's the thing people usually recommend to do. And I've had good experiences with that.
Although, the top of Fringe winner in 2014 was a show called Girls, produced by Matt Quinn. Oh, it's not Girls, Little Women.
Women. Yeah.
Women.
Based on Girls, about
Little Women and Girls.
yeah, Little Women and Girls put together. And that show had all of its performances, I think, in a week and a half.
Yeah.
And then it was gone.
Yeah.
And everyone
Yeah.
was like, and that show packed them in. And then they brought it back later with a different cast. But they came from New York. So, but in that 1 week and a half, they got enough respect and love that they made it obviously financially worthwhile, and they got an award, the best award you can get at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. So.
And I would just add, I think the average is 5 that Fringe says every year.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, really weigh the show up or down to how many. And I've seen shows with 3 shows that do very, very well and get buzz and all that, like a Mermaid Who Learned to Fly just did 3, but she was out there networking.
Red Bastard
And then
did
she-
2.
Red Bastard too.
Did 2 in one top of Fringe.
That
One
was
top
wild.
of Fringe. So it's and actually, if I may,
Sure.
hi, my name is Matthew Quinn. I actually run Theater Asylum Combined Art Form. I've been doing the Fringe since the first year, and I've been involved with the San Francisco Fringe. I first want to thank Monica and Fringe for doing this. This was such a great panel and information. I know Michael for many years, and Vanessa I just met, and I love both of their work. I've extended both of their shows for Best of, for the Encores. And it was so cool to get the insight behind some of the process, and I didn't know the timeline of Ophelia and all that. So that was awesome. And if I were to highlight 2 kind of takeaways, that sense of that Fringe production versus other, it shouldn't be like, it's a Fringe production, it's just a Fringe show. But it is a step, a very important step for your production. And to keep in mind the simplicity and the importance of the words and the acting and the directing. And be aware of the bells and whistles you have there, that 5-piece band that right now that you can play with a synthesizer. Use that for the Fringe, use the synth, use the CD player. But know, when a producer comes and sees the show that, oh, this works really well with a 5-piece band. Plan the bigger script. I've seen scripts that are 60 minutes that go on to become 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Don't force it into Fringe, but be aware of it. And then the other thing, ultimately, I was in the previous panel, and you guys touched on it, and you're doing it right now. It's the networking and talking to each other. It's the community. It's meeting people. So start that now, shaking hands, introducing yourselves. It's all part of the process. Start with me. I'm going to be here because along with running venues and producing shows during Fringe, I'm also offering free workshops and consulting for the Fringe. And we will be having workshops, 2 actually next week, this coming up week for solo shows. Anybody has a solo show? Introducing 2 top directors, Jessica Johnson and John Coppola. And then beginning of January, I'm going to start a once-a-month Asylum, How to Produce a Hollywood Fringe Show. So I'll be doing that, maybe 2 the first month, but pretty continuously to answer that step-by-step process and questions. We also started just yesterday a panel on how to tour your Fringe show. So for anybody who has a show ready for the next step, we'll be bringing that back along with additional workshops throughout the year. Because we know how many questions, how much is going on, and trying to help out with all that. Again, thank you Fringe for this. This was wonderful. I'm going to be around too with with business cards, and you can grab them up front too. So thank you.
To say to that a little bit, first of all, Matt is an incredible resource. He was the first person I met in Fringe when I came in 2011 to the first town hall of 2011. I showed up and he kind of came up on the stage and talked a little bit. He was over where Sacred Fools is right now. That was his space for years. And I just sort of like walked up to him, and he's very approachable. In fact, you'll find, all of the venue people are very approachable, and they want to hear what you're talking about. Matt he's an exceptional resource, though, for many, many reasons. And he'll be your friend, too. He's a good guy. But also, in terms of what he was saying about the show, or about the Fringe, and the nature of the Fringe, so you got kind of 2 choices. You got the big thing that you've always wanted to write, and it takes place in south of France, and it's got 12 people in it, and you really want to do this show. You can do that at Fringe. it's a musical maybe, and then you've got all these other elements. Nah, it's still creeping out of Fringe. It's like, it's almost like you have a couple choices to take that huge behemoth show that you've always wanted to do and make it happen in Fringe, which can totally work. Or you can see this, and this is where I get my inspiration as a writer. We didn't really talk about this too much, but I wanted to say it. I mean, we started to talk about it. I love seeing Fringe shows that are terrible, as well as seeing shows that are good. Because when I'm sitting in the audience and watching, I just want to swipe. If it's bad, I just want to swipe everything off the stage. And as a writer, I start fresh with this space, with this palette, and I go. And from there, I'm imagining people coming here and there, and it's all coming to life for me. That's how I thought of Skullduggery. I was watching a show and I was like, why are there no gravediggers out on the stage telling me a prequel of Hamlet? And then that's how that happened. So it's like, I guess use all of the good and all of the bad to fuel you, and know that this is your palette, for better or for worse. It's going to be your palette, so you can either squeeze your show into it, or you can grow something in it. I don't think there's a wrong way to do it, but you have a couple different approaches, and if you're weighing a couple different plays right now, as you know, you very well could be. Choose the one that you want to tell in this space, or any space that's like the intimate space that really speaks to you, because that's what's great about Fringe.
Sure.
Can you bounce back to that?
Sure.
Just because I've worked with Mike several times, and that idea of fitting it into the space, and I would say, as a general note when doing it, approach it and be aware of the venue and talking to them and what the needs are of your show too, the needs of the 20 shows in this space. And have the conversation, and things can happen. It shouldn't be to stop the artistic exploration. If anything, like Monica said, that limitation is really the beautiful part about Fringe, that you can do the fireball without having a fireball. So talk to them about it. And as an example, to see an absolutely perfect Fringe show that so must have a life afterwards, you've got to see it. It's One More Chance, right? Tuesday?
Oh, yeah. Shakespeare's Last Night Out.
Shakespeare's Last Night Out, because it's entertaining theatrically. It's an education one that has a lot of potential, I think, outside of it. He's been running it in a bar, so unique venue. It doesn't have to be one of these theaters.
The audience drinks with Shakespeare. They sing with Shakespeare.
It's amazing. And you wrote it all, and you will learn things, even if you know everything about Shakespeare. So see it, and the bar is great, and it's a venue, so you're like checking out a venue. This is a
3 clubs. It's right. You have Vine. Well, Vine and the Santa Monica. If you just go like right next to the gas station, there's a bar called 3 Clubs there. They have a back room. They do a lot of burlesque there. They do a lot of great stuff. And in Fringe, it's become another hot Fringe venue.
Yeah.
So
totally.
And Michelle. I think Michelle's booking there.
Yeah, Michelle and Allie.
Michelle and Allie right now. Yeah, they're just. It's amazing. It's a cool spot to do a show. And what's interesting is when these open houses start, go see them. Go really go look at them and imagine what you can create in those spaces, because it will. I think in that space that you run the Lex, right?
The McCadden.
The McCadden. That one. The McCadden is the one that had the pole, right? Upstairs, like you have the upstairs. And
they put it because there's a second level.
Yeah. There's a second level where there's a pole. Yeah. Okay. So they did this great. They did a sequel to 12th Night, and they did it at McCadden. I saw it, and I loved it. And they had the pole, and they had a pole dancer, sort of using the pole. And they're like, how do we use that pole? And that pole dancer was the moon, and she gave like moon dust and you realize that like these spaces have these sort of tricks that make them unique.
There's character in all the different spaces that you can use.
Yeah, as a writer, that's all fodder for your creation.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just talking about things that may not work so well. Has everyone ever done it 1 year and then worked on a project and brought it back another year? Or is that frowned upon?
It's happened back to. There was a show that I'm thinking of that was here back-to-back years. It doesn't happen a whole lot. That doesn't mean you couldn't.
Or they do a one-off. Like, if everybody really liked it and it's not so production heavy that, it's cost effective to do it. I think Aaron he skipped a year. He did Devil and Billy Markham, and then like a year went by, and then in 2016 he did one performance of it.
Yeah, kind of a reprise.
So I've been thinking about this for a while, and I want to get your take on this. I do a lot of comedy and I write comedy. So how would it be if somebody performs a half-hour sitcom on stage? Like sitcoms like what we see on TV, half hour, they are so hugely popular and they're all based on setup and punchline. Now, is it possible to perform a sitcom play on stage and will it be successful? Like I don't understand that, I don't know, I'm not experienced enough to analyze the dynamics.
Seems fascinating to me. Why not?
I think it's a taste thing. I mean, it's called like a living room style play, which
But
there's
do you
lots
think
of
that there
plays
are
like
theater
that.
audience that have come to see maybe, I don't know, a story or something, and it's difficult to make a live audience laugh after every 2 minutes? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Then you can make it a satire of a sitcom and have the laugh track going and have the audience laughing or not laughing, or like David Lynch does in Rabbits, having the laugh track for no apparent reason at all. While rabbits walk across the stage and it becomes a statement about that. I mean, there's so many ways to make that work for you.
I think the theater is, the beauty of the theater is that you can have an experience that you cannot have in other forms of art.
Yeah.
And that, this is just me telling you what I think, not like a Fringe thing. But I think about the things that make the theater special, and what can you get from having the audience in the same room with you, and why is that different than watching something on TV? And do you know, why should someone come to watch it in the theater as opposed to watching something on TV?
But see, I don't know, but there's a different dynamics between the TV and stage. And when we see the live audience laughter on TV, there is a wrangler who's like always, asking people to laugh.
So use it. Yeah, if you want a live audience wrangler that holds up an applause sign and everybody wants them to laugh, hold it up. Use it. That's one way you can
show it that one.
You know, Neil Simon never needed that though.
Yeah.
And his was laugh, 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 laugh. He would pace back and forth behind the theater, and he never watched the play. He only listened to hear what they were laughing and what line they were laughing at, and the pace they were laughing at. That's all Neil Simon. That's how he wrote. So if you are trying to get laughs, maybe the best thing to do is just to earn them.
Yeah,
you know what I
hear
mean?
them. Emmett, my fiance, will tell you, I will sit in a show.
So that's why you've been filming us the whole time.
Yeah. I will sit in the back row, right under the booth, like the worst seat in the house, because the booth light's right on top of you. And I will not relax until I hear the first audience reaction. And then I know the play has its feet. So it really comes down to, if you're gonna do a TV sitcom, canned laughter type show, do you want to earn it like Neil Simon, or do you want to make it a commentary to the audience and say, laugh? Yeah. It's really an artistic choice. Like, how are you communicating with the audience? Like Monica said, it's really a conversation. Your actors are having a conversation with the audience.
Yes.
And you want them to react. But how are you eliciting that reaction? Are you holding up the sign for them, telling them what or do you want it genuinely coming through that? So it's just a choice. It's a choice.
Both are possible.
Oh yeah.
Anything's possible. Do whatever you want.
It's interesting though. I think what you're saying though is that it's interesting that there is a certain wall that comes up. When you have the audience told when to laugh, it's sort of, it's an interesting wall. The audience is going to be aware of that wall, of that sound that's defining what their experience should be, and they're going to be navigating around it. Because that laughter will be part of the conversation now. Yeah. It won't be really disappearing into the general euphoria of the humor.
I just thought of this based on what you guys are saying right now, and has anybody done stuff where they broadcast their Fringe show? I mean, does that betray the sort of what you're trying to do, like a periscope of it and set it up so people can watch it, like from far?
Yeah, I mean, the question of whether or not that betrays something is a much bigger one that I think we're all going to be living with in our lives for decades to come as we enter this brave new world. But that has happened. The Fringe itself had a live stream service one year. And it was actually, it was early, it was like 2011, so it was actually before that kind of technology, you know, even 6 years ago, it was much less common than it is now.
Right, like it wasn't in everybody's palm, like.
Right, right. I think if you should double check if you're using equity actors, what the rules are. I'm not totally up on
Oh,
the
make sure you
state of affairs
talk that out
equity.
with, if you're using equity actors or equity directors or whatever, make sure you read the waivers really clearly.
Yeah.
Make sure you are in agreement with the venue, because some venues might not allow that.
Yeah.
Make sure that if you're using published work, if you're not writing it yourself, or if you're using portions of published work, that you have the correct permission. I mean, there's lots of different hoops. It's not to say that you can't do it.
Yeah.
Just make sure that you're doing it in a way that's safe for you as an artist.
Yeah, but if you check all those boxes, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did it for a show last night, actually, for them. Yeah.
Speaking of equity, you should definitely check out what the equity rules are going to be changing in very soon. Many of you already know this, but look into it. I mean, you may end up using non-equity actors, or you may end up having to. I mean, I don't know what the showcase code is or what's really possible. I think our company exists as a membership company, which means it should be okay. Some of them do. Yeah, Matt. What's up?
I was just going to say, 50 seat or less, you are going to be pretty safe for equity.
Really?
As long as it doesn't go more than 16 shows, and there's a bunch of other rules there. Or if you're a membership company, which I imagine most people here aren't, or you are an equity actor, and then you produce your own show. So if you're an equity actor, easy. Otherwise, I would stay in the 50 seat or less venues, just that way you will be safe. And you'll still need to fill out an agreement with equity, you'll need to go through all the hoops.
But there are 99-seat theaters in the festival, and if you do choose to go there, just be aware.
You just need to cast
Well, the 99-seat code, though, that will be paying minimum wage.
Yeah,
So
for equity
those
actors.
will be the one, if you have equity actors.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying, if I wasn't clear. The 50 seat or less, you can do equity actors without as many hoops. Over 50 seats, if you use equity actors, you're gonna need to pay minimum wage. That's
right.
The reality. For Fringe, you know.
Yeah, Fringe doesn't have any special relationship with equity. All the regular equity rules apply. And everybody is on their own dealing with equity. The festival does not do it for you.
Right.
Disclaimer.
Going on the side of with actors, when you either hire them or use them for the play, are there contracts that they will sign for the period of Fringe?
That's up to the producer.
The producer director decides that, but be aware when you're budgeting, if the producer director and you have budgeted a certain amount that needs to be paid out to the actors, or a certain amount of time that you can use them, that you respect those agreements, because scheduling, especially an ensemble show, is hard for rehearsals and tech and all that stuff. I had 6, and we were driving all over LA trying to figure it out. So just be aware of everybody's time, be aware of everybody's gas money if you have to travel somewhere far. Just respect, the people that you're working with, and that you have everything set out so no one is caught off guard once you get closer and closer to June.
Anybody else? Cool, awesome. Well, first I just want to say thank you to the Complex for having us here. They hosted us today. So and I thank all of you for being here, because the Fringe community is only as strong as all the participants within it. And you've taken the first step. And Mike's going to take a picture.
I'm doing a picture. I promised I'd do this. Everyone wave for the camera. I'm going to post this on the Fringe site.
Yay.
Hey, you in the you.
All right.